Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Basics and to the final part of our large scale build of the Airfix 1/24th scale Supermarine Spitfire Mk.IXc. In the previous episodes we completed the cockpit, engine and wing structure before bringing the main airframe together. In this final stage we will complete the model by painting the camouflage, adding the invasion stripes, applying decals, weathering the aircraft and finishing the assembly with the undercarriage canopy and final details. To make painting easier, the removable cowlings have been temporarily taped together from the inside and then taped to the fuselage. The tape holds the parts surprisingly securely, and the lower cowling also helps keep everything aligned. This allows the entire airframe to be painted as a single piece, so the camouflage pattern flows cleanly across all of the panels. The lower cowling will eventually be painted separately, but for now it stays attached so the pattern matches correctly. Before any paint is applied, the openings need to be masked to prevent overspray. The cockpit opening, gun ports, aerial mounting point and any exposed interior areas are carefully covered so paint cannot enter the model. The first layer applied to the aircraft is a full black base coat. The entire airframe is sprayed black, which helps reveal the subtle stress skin detail moulded into the surface of the model. The light rippling effect of the aluminium panels becomes much more visible under this coat and adds realism to the finished aircraft. The black base also provides a dark tonal foundation that will influence the colours that are applied later. Once the base coat has dried, attention turns to areas where the paint would naturally wear. Before the camouflage colours are applied, selected panels receive a layer of silver paint followed by chipping fluid. This is only applied in the areas that would realistically see wear, such as leading edges, high traffic panels and places where ground crews would frequently step during maintenance. Applying it selectively helps control the final weathering so the entire model does not appear overly worn. With the base layers prepared, a light silver underpainting layer is sprayed in certain areas to help break up the large blocks of colour that will come later. This subtle tonal variation adds depth beneath the final camouflage. The camouflage layout is then lightly drawn onto the surface using pencil lines to guide the pattern. These lines show where the RAF camouflage colours will fall across the wings and fuselage. The camouflage is painted first and the invasion stripes will be added afterwards. The first camouflage colour applied is the dark green upper surface colour. It's sprayed freehand along the pencil guidelines to establish the pattern. On camera the contrast between the colours can appear quite strong, but in reality the effect is more subtle and can be softened later if necessary. Once the green has been applied, the camouflage boundaries are masked before the grey colour is sprayed. Small rolls of blue tack are placed along the pencil lines and supported with masking tape. The blue tack creates a slightly raised edge, which produces the soft but controlled camouflage line that is characteristic of RAF aircraft when the second colour is sprayed. With the masking in place, the grey camouflage colour is applied across the remaining upper surfaces. When the masking is removed, care must be taken around areas treated with chipping fluid, as the paint can sometimes lift more easily than expected. Once the camouflage paint is dried, the chipping fluid can be activated. A small amount of water is sprayed onto the surface and then gently worked with a stiff brush. This softens the paint layer and allows small chips to appear, revealing the silver beneath. The aim is to create subtle signs of wear rather than heavy damage. With the camouflage complete, attention turns to one of the most recognisable features of the aircraft, the D-Day invasion stripes. These markings covered large sections of the wings and fuselage and were usually applied quickly in the field. As a result, they were rarely neat or perfectly straight and often showed heavy wear, particularly on the upper wings where ground crews frequently walked. The spacing of each stripe is around 19.5mm, and if the first stripe is even slightly misaligned, the entire pattern begins to drift out of position relative to panel lines and other details. The area is first sprayed completely white, and once the paint is dried, the black stripes are carefully masked and sprayed over the top. The upper wing stripes are weathered more heavily to represent the wear caused by foot traffic, while the underside stripes are kept much cleaner since they would see far less use. Masking the underside stripes is slightly more complicated because the pattern needs to wrap around the radiator housings and air intake structures. Rather than attempting to mask the entire underside at once, the painting is carried out in sections. The underside is first sprayed white before the black stripes are masked and applied. Once the stripes are complete, the paintwork is sealed with several coats of semi-gloss lacquer. This protects the paint and prepares the surface for decals. A full gloss finish is not necessary, as the semi-gloss surface is already smooth enough for the decals to settle properly. The decals are then applied. The decals respond very well and require only a small amount of setting solution. Setting solution is applied to the surface before the decal is positioned and excess moisture is removed with a cotton bud. Gentle heat from a hairdryer helps the decals settle down into the panel lines and rivets, so it appears painted onto the surface. With the major paintwork completed, the next stage is fitting the flaps. On the real Spitfire, the flaps were not adjustable for a range of positions. They were either fully raised or fully lowered, and were mainly used as air brakes rather than lift devices. In reality, they were rarely left down on the ground because they restricted airflow through the radiators. For display purposes, however, they are installed in the lowered position. Before gluing them in place, any paint is removed from the contact points so the glue can bond properly. The flaps are then secured in position using superglue so they sit at roughly 90 degrees. The landing gear assembly begins with the wheels. Each wheel is made up of 2 tyre halves and a 2-part hub assembly. The hubs are painted silver and the tyres are painted in a tyre black colour. A small alignment key on the hubs is removed so the tyres can sit correctly on their flattened sections. The bottle is placed on the flat surface while the wheels are assembled so the flat spots naturally align with the ground. Once positioned correctly, the wheels are pressed onto the hubs and the landing gear legs are permanently glued into their wings. With the undercarriage installed, the remaining small details can be added. These include the radio antenna mask, the flat position indicators, and several small access panels. The engine is also permanently secured by gluing the mounting bulkhead and engine bearers, which allows the surrounding panels and infill sections to be fitted. A slipper fuel tank is then installed beneath the fuselage. This tank mounts in a way that traps the lower cowling in place, so the cowling must be glued permanently before the tank is attached. The entire model then receives a satin clear coat, followed by a final matte finish. The matte coat helps unify the paintwork and provides a better surface for weathering powders and staining effects. Weathering is applied gradually across the aircraft. Gunport staining is added using smoke effects to simulate cordite residue from the cannons, and exhaust streaking is applied along the fuselage sides using weathering powders. These stains usually show a darker soot centre surrounded by a lighter outer residue caused by the leaded fuel used during the period. Small fuel spills are also added around the filler caps, and a light dusting is applied across the decals to tone down their brightness so they blend naturally into the surrounding paint. The canopy assembly is then prepared. The canopy is made up of the rear section, the windscreen and the sliding hood. One version of the canopy includes a faint mould seam running down the centre, which must be removed. The seam is carefully sanded using very fine abrasive pads before the clear plastic is polished using polishing compound until it becomes perfectly transparent again. The canopy frames are masked using the pre-cut mask set included in the kit. The interior frame colour is sprayed first, followed by the exterior camouflage colours, so the framing appears accurate when viewed from both inside and outside the cockpit. Before the windscreen is installed, the gun sight assembly is built and placed into position in the cockpit. The windscreen and rear canopy sections are then glued in place using small amounts of extra thin cement applied carefully along the edges. The sliding canopy can either be left loose or secured with a clear adhesive designed for transparent parts. The cockpit side door is installed in the open position. Finally, the aircraft receives its most unusual addition. This particular Spitfire is equipped with beer barrels mounted beneath the wings. The barrels are cast in resin and must be carefully removed from their casting blocks. Resin is brittle and produces fine dust when sanded, so it's important to work slowly and carefully while cleaning the parts. Each barrel consists of the main body, end caps, nose cones and mounting brackets. Once cleaned up, they are assembled, painted and decaled before being attached to the aircraft. The mounting brackets are extremely delicate, so they must be handled carefully during installation. With the barrel secured beneath the wings and the slipper tank installed under the fuselage, the model is finally complete. This has been a detailed and rewarding project with a lot of painting, masking and careful assembly, but the finished Airfix 24th scale Spitfire Mk.IXc captures an enormous amount of detail and character at this scale. Thank you for following along throughout this series and joining us for the full build. We hope you've enjoyed and we'll see you next time.